And a lot of people want to dump these exhaust tips and stuff on. Those things are not engineered to give you good low-end performance. They might give you 5 or 6 more horsepower at the top end or mid-band, but you lose that power throttle that's in the exhaust, you know, the solenoid controlled, ECU controlled power throttle. All bikes have had that since the late 90s, and what the advantage of that power throttle is it beefs up the low end power. It gives you good throttle response off the low end. And so 9 times out of 10 what you see with that is bikes that have a flat spot or a low spot or a dip in the power at low RPMs, but they have, you know, 5-6 more horsepower across the rest of the power band. So that's not worth it. To me, I don't care enough about the exhaust that much that I'm gonna eliminate my low end power to give myself slightly more power at the middle. And I definitely would want that throttle body in there somewhere. So I would do some surgery. Definitely would want to do some surgery to get that solenoid back in there. So I don't really think there's a reason to mess with this 14R power-wise. But the weight balance is not quite what I would want. I would want a little bit more weight on the front wheel. Give me a little bit more bite in the cornering. I'd say the FC1 handled itself well, although the larger issue that I think is a real problem is the Yamahas consistently have not really impressed me with their finish, the engineering of the bike compared to Kawasaki and Suzuki. I think that the newer well, maybe even mine, you know, considering the problems I have with it, the newer Yamahas have just not been as polished. They don't give you that solid, robust feeling. Like the FC1 is always something wrong with the freaking handlebar mount. Now I get on this one, and the throttle is a problem. It's just way too throttly. Okay, you twist the throttle. I never open it more than I would say a quarter turn at the very most. I mean, a bike's got a ton of power, and the moment you crank the throttle, it goes vroom. You know, it's not a joke on that bike. I wouldn't want to ride that bike in the rain or on a wet road. It had that much low and off throttle response. The ZX14R has more power, and it wasn't even nearly like that. Even in A mode, in 1 mode, or F mode, or whatever you want to call it, it was, I would think it was very, somewhat middle of the road response. No need to have the throttle that sensitive, especially on a bike that has 120, 150 horsepower. Which I think is a good segue into the whole 600 versus newbie debacle. I wouldn't put a newbie on a 600 because it's got too much power and they're likely to flip the bike if they hit the slightest bump. No, the FC1, yes. I'd put them on a 14R, no problem. I don't think it had a problem with that. I don't think the responsiveness of the throttle or the power of the engine is a problem in that bike. I don't think it might be knocking on the door with the Z1000. It definitely was a problem with the FC1, not because it had so much power, but because the throttle was so fucking responsive. I don't think it's a problem with the Gixxer 1000. I think if they get on it and ride it like a 300, they would definitely have a problem. There's a fine line between having the throttle be too sensitive and the rider just being an idiot and knowing nothing about power, about how to control it. you cannot ride it like it's a dirt bike or it's a moped. If you get on these bikes and ride them like they're mopeds, yes, you will run into trouble. If you respect the fact that they are not mopeds, you should not run into trouble. The FC1 is too far all over that line. It's just the responsiveness of the throttle is just too much. Even for an experienced rider, I think it's too much. I don't think it's an issue of do you have experience riding a litter bike or not. I don't think it's an issue of do you have much experience riding a motorcycle at all. I think it's a simple issue that the throttle is just too damn responsive. If you are riding a bike and you have to worry about the slightest crack of the throttle, less than the play, causing the back wheel to spin out, that's too touchy. That's simple. It doesn't matter how much power it has, peak. It's too touchy. None of the other bikes I rode in that demo made me worry about the back wheel spinning out from behind me off idle just because I twitched the throttle too much. Like the FC1, the 2013 FC1 did. And I've ridden the 2012 and 2011 FC1, they didn't have that problem. The R6 definitely did not have that problem. The R6, I thought you had to wind it. It was just a lot of winding and a lot of racing. Yes, it would happily wind, and yes, it would happily race. I did not enjoy riding the R6 this time as much because it was just too much. Wow, wow. And yes, it would do that. And yeah, there's a certain amount of thrill and joy from revving an engine when you ride by. But it's so 600-y, You know the guy is. Because he's on a 600. You know that. Not because he's riding a truly fast bike where you don't need to race the damn engine like that. And a sport bike, riding around, racing the thing at 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 RPM is not a sign that you are riding it quickly. It's a sign that the engine is anemic. Or at least relatively anemic. And if that's the case with the R6, trust me, it's a lot worse with the ZX632, or whatever the hell it is. A lot worse with the ZX6R. Although I didn't ride the 630, the new to 2013 630, I'm talking about the last year's 6R. It was a lot worse. It was just so cammy, it wasn't even funny. The engine made no power until it got to about 9,000 RPMs. And on top of that, it had a hesitation where you open the throttle, you could hear it. Okay? You can hear it go. Then slowly start to build RPMs. The R6 to be that much fun to ride, especially after riding the ZX14, especially while riding with ZX10s and ZX14s. I thought it was just, I thought it was okay, only in the context of riding it at relative to the speed limit. Bike will definitely break the speed limit happily for you. It's just a lot of work to ride fast, I think. I felt like it just needed more power. And the R6 was the first ride I took. Well, the second ride I took. I rode the Busa first, then I took the R6. So the Busa, and also one thing I want to mention R6 is R6, the clutch just didn't want to, I couldn't get the damn thing in neutral. The clutch would not disengage while and I ended up having to stop it, like literally I had to turn the engine off at the first light, and then kick it down into neutral. After we started riding a little bit, then the neutral I could get it into neutral and it wasn't a problem, but I was literally on the verge of taking it back, just saying, look, I can't ride it. This isn't safe, I can't get the bike into neutral. I tried revving it and then dropping it into neutral. Tried all this. I kick it, it would either go into first or into second. In the first and the second. I couldn't get it to go into neutral. Sure enough, we start riding. We go out on the demo, and I was a little greedy. I said, "Fucking, I'll ride it anyway." You know, I didn't want to go through. I didn't want to take the bike back. I didn't want to miss my ride. So I rode it in. I said, "I figured I'll have to ride. I just have to be really careful." And sure enough, by the time we got to the second light, it started acting okay. It wasn't a problem. But not being able to get it into neutral is a classic situation where you can't get the clutch out enough. And it's already, you know, it had a long pull. I'm pulling all the way down the handle. And I still can't get the thing out. And I saw what had happened was the cable adapter was a good inch or half inch away from the handle. So someone had twisted it out to tighten the clutch up, but they didn't lock the cable adjuster. Or else people had smoked the clutch, and they needed to readjust it. It's probably more likely to happen. So I tightened the cable adjuster back up and didn't solve the problem. Obviously, the cable itself needs to be tightened up to give it some more clutch. This guy rode up behind me. His truck rode up behind me. We're past this other truck in the center lane, and there's a truck behind me right on my bumper. So I guess he can't get in the left lane before Georgia again. So wasn't impressed by it. I don't think it really won, and especially at that price. Given it is the same price as the R1. I see no point in buying it unless you're looking for a bike to race. The only thing, why would anybody buy an R6 other than to race it? I'd hate to buy it as my first bike because I'm spending the same damn money as I'd spend in an R1. But admittedly, for, you know, a newbie, I guess, R6 would be fine. I mean, honestly, it was fine. I would have no problem starting somebody out on an R6. I don't think it was a problem. I'd be happy riding an R6 as first bike. I was so unimpressed with the engine. I didn't think it was slow, but I didn't think it was weak. I didn't think it was. I guess if I were to characterize it, I'd say it was an engine that read well. It had nice power across the powering band, but it didn't have much power. No question you're riding 600. And I've ridden the FC6R, which definitely is tuned for the mid-range, and definitely will run out of power at about 9K, and definitely doesn't have a lot of power. I don't see the 600s. I have not ridden the 600 yet, that I think is too much for a beginner. You can type those words out. I have yet to ride a 600 motorcycle that I think is too much for a beginner. The sheriff behind that guy. So I rode the Busa, the 2013 Busa in white. That's my first ride. First ride in a while. I haven't ridden my bike in a couple of weeks. And I was pretty impressed with it. I think the Busa is one of those bikes that grows on you with time. It has a very good motor, sort of electric motor type motor.